Okay, so yesterday we went over our microscopy lab, or did the microscopy lab. Remember that that is due on Wednesday of next week. So if you get it done early, obviously you can bring it in, have me look it over. Tomorrow's quiz. Okay, tomorrow's quiz will be on cell theory and microscopy, and a little bit of today's lesson. Okay, at the end of today's lesson, I'm going to give you your cell diagrams, and we are going to label them together. That will not be on tomorrow's quiz. That will be on next week's quiz. Okay, so tomorrow's quiz will just have basically lessons 1 and 2 and like the first half of this on modes of nutrition. Okay, that is all that will be on tomorrow's quiz. Okay. All right, so in this lesson, we need to know and understand how plant and animal cells are different. We know that they're actually much more the same than they are different, but we focus on the differences because there's reasons for them, and they're very good reasons. Okay? We need to understand why those differences are present and necessary, and then at the end, be able to correctly label plant and animal cells, which, as I said, is not going to be on tomorrow's quiz, but next week's. Okay, so why are plant and animals different?
Because they require different food sources?
Exactly. They have different nutritional requirements, or what we call, okay, modes of nutrition. Pretty sure I pressed the blue button. Okay, they have different modes of nutrition. Okay, those 3 words are really important because they are the reason why, okay, plants and animals are different. Okay, and even why plants and fungus are different. I should say fungi. I use plural plants. Plural for fungus is fungi. Okay, so did you ever notice that about the English language, by the way? It ends in us. It's plural is I. Octopus, octopi. Okay, sorry, tangent. Squirrel! Okay, all right, okay, now we're back on task. Okay, so modes of nutrition. That refers to how does an organism get its fuel. Okay, now, the fuel for all living organisms is the same thing. It's glucose. In one way or another, everything you intake as an animal needs to be processed down to glucose. That is the fuel that your cells run on. And plants are the same. Photosynthesis, as an end product, produces glucose. Okay? When a fungus is eating away at whatever its substrate is, it's needing to digest that and turn it into glucose. That is the fuel for which your cells run. Okay? Everyone with me on that? So your mode of nutrition refers to how you get your glucose. Okay? For an animal, it's by eating other things. For a plant, it's by carrying out photosynthesis. For a fungus, it's eating other things. Okay? Because that's in fact what they do. All right. So, modes of nutrition. There are many subtle differences that we've already seen, okay, between plant and animal cells. Okay? Subtle means that, you know, they're quite obvious. Okay? We see them there, okay, that we're looking at, you know, the cell wall. Presence of chloroplasts, a big giant water vacuole, okay, things of that nature. Whereas for an animal, there's no cell wall, okay, there's no chloroplasts. Instead, there are lysosomes. Those are the things that digest the food. Okay? So they're going to have these differences because of how they get their glucose. Okay, everyone's clear on that so far? Okay. So we got obviously the animal here on the left, okay, gnawing on a wildebeest there, okay, and then we've got the plant here on the right, okay. So with photosynthesis, what's going on is that carbon dioxide is being taken in by the leaves, okay, and then in the tissue of the leaves, okay, photosynthesis will occur where carbon dioxide and water are broken apart. Okay, so they take in the carbon dioxide, they take in the water from the roots, and the process of photosynthesis breaks the carbon dioxide apart, separates the carbon from the oxygen, and breaks the water apart, separates the hydrogen from the oxygen, okay? And then puts them back together in a different way, just like Dalton said, right? In a chemical reaction, atoms can be separated, joined, or rearranged. Photosynthesis is a chemical reaction. Okay? As a chemical reaction, photosynthesis looks like this. Does that look somewhat familiar? What does it look like?
Combustion reaction.
Yeah, except it's backwards. Yeah. Okay? Photosynthesis is the opposite of combustion. Okay? Think about it. When you make a campfire, what are you burning?
Oxygen.
Wood. Yeah, and oxygen. You're using the oxygen to burn the wood. Okay? Where did the wood come from? Right. How did the plants make the material? Yeah, that process right there. Okay? So when you're burning the firewood or the coal or any other fossil fuel, okay, essentially what you're doing is the opposite of what made it. Yeah. Okay? You're doing the opposite of the process that created that stuff in the first place. Okay? All of our fossil fuels, they don't come from dinosaurs, by the way. Okay? They come from dead plants, dead photosynthetic organisms, either aquatic or terrestrial. Okay? And they are, what we are doing is basically reversing the work that they did hundreds of millions of years ago, okay, by simply burning that material. Okay? Now, when an animal eats a plant, so let's say you got a fierce predator like a cow, okay? I mean, if you're a blade of grass, a cow is pretty scary. Okay? Even herbivores are predators of something, okay? Of plants. They don't have to be fast. Okay? Cows are not. All right, but when they eat the plant, are they really just burning glucose in the presence of oxygen and then releasing these two things as a byproduct? Okay? This is what we call the carbon cycle. Okay? You probably learned about that in junior high. Okay? The carbon cycle is simply photosynthesis and what we call cellular respiration continuing to go round and round with each other. All right? So when we're looking at cellular respiration, which plants, animals, fungi, everything basically uses, okay, that's the opposite. Okay? So plants make the fuel for animals, and animals make the fuel for plants. Okay? You ever heard that talking to your plant makes it grow better? It's 100% true. Okay? If you talk to your plant, it will grow better because you're giving it, you're exhaling onto it exactly what it needs. Okay? There's carbon dioxide when you exhale when you're talking to your plant. Don't do it around other people, it looks crazy. Okay? But if you're talking to your plant, okay, you're putting carbon dioxide onto the leaves, okay? They can be absorbed and then used for photosynthesis. Okay? Does it matter whether you tell it nice things or mean things?
No.
Apparently there's a study that shows it does have some effect, but I don't know, I don't buy that. Okay? Apparently like yelling at your plant makes it grow worse than talking nicely and telling it nice things. I think that's probably garbage, but okay. Giving it the carbon dioxide is giving it what it needs to make sugar. And then the plants themselves also do this. Okay? They carry out photosynthesis, but photosynthesis doesn't actually make the energy for them. Cellular respiration does. Okay? They just make more of that than they need, and it builds up in their tissue and can be food for animals.
Wait, so if that's the chemical reaction for like how animals get their food,
Yeah.
isn't that C6H12O6 like already glucose?
That is glucose, yes.
Yeah, so why?
Well, they have to break down what food, sorry, that's a good question, I just wasn't there yet. But, okay, yeah, whatever you eat, obviously you don't eat glucose, right? Like glucose is not normally a food ingredient in too many things, but our digestive system chemically breaks down the food we eat into simpler things like glucose. Okay, now, are all things that we eat easily converted?
No.
No. Okay, like if you eat a lot of carbs, carbs make glucose more easily than other molecules. Carbohydrates, sorry. Right? Like if I eat a lot of bread or rice, okay, or like pasta or anything like that, any carbohydrate, carbohydrates are very easily converted into glucose because they're basically chains of simple sugars. Glucose is a simple sugar when you eat carbohydrates, it's usually starch. Starch is a chain of lots of simple sugars bonded together. So your body can very easily just break those chains and have a whole bunch of simple sugar available, right? Like distance runners will often carbo load, okay, in the days before a race. Okay, if they're going to be running a marathon or something like that, they'll eat a lot of carbs, and their body will. Oh, can you say? Okay, your body will break down those starches, but it's more energy than you needed on the days you weren't running, so it gets stored in your muscles as glycogen. Okay, and that can be easily converted to glucose when you start running. What would happen to that glycogen if you didn't use it? Does it get turned into anything else? Fat. Yeah. Okay. So if you're consuming more energy than you need, okay, your body first breaks it down and turns it into glycogen and glucose. But if there's more of it than you need, your body's not going to waste it. Okay. Your body's not going to go, we don't need that. Just let them get rid of it. No, it's going to store it. Okay. And it's stored in animals as fat. Okay. In plants, it's stored as starch. Okay. So we can eat that. Okay, like if a potato plant, for example, it carries out tons of photosynthesis and it grows, but it makes way more energy than it needs. So it stores it in a tuber, potato, under the ground for use later. Okay, anyone ever, you guys seen The Martian? Okay, how did Mark Watney make the potato plants? He just cut the potatoes he had in half and put them in the ground. How does that work? Potato is a whole bunch of energy. Okay, it's plant fat. Starch is really plant fat. And so when you put those in the ground, there's plant cells in there, they start dividing, okay, and the plant can actually grow from that root. A potato can, you can't do it with all plants, okay, but a potato does what we call vegetative propagation, and it just grows from that potato. And there's enough energy in that potato to make it get enough energy to get its leaf above ground, and then it can carry out photosynthesis. Anyone ever, anyone ever accidentally forget potatoes in your pantry? Right? What do they start to grow? Yeah, they start to sprout. Okay? For exactly the reason that we were just talking about. Okay? They start to vegetatively propagate. Okay? They try and get something into the light, right, so that they can grow. Okay? So starches are plant fat. So when we eat plants, we're getting starches. Okay? Those are easily converted by our bodies into energy. What's another one that's easily converted? It's another food that we eat that's easily converted into glucose.
Sugar.
Sugar's a carbohydrate, but yes, absolutely. Fats. Okay? If we eat fat, so we eat another animal, okay, that fat is an energy storage molecule. Our body knows what to do with it, our body can make it itself. Okay? So if we eat it, the body goes, hey, fat's cool, we can make that into sugar. Not as easily as carbohydrates, but still pretty easily. Okay? What's the hardest one? What's the hardest thing we eat to convert to glucose? Protein. Yeah? That's why so many like fad diets were all about eating just meat, okay, or just protein. So you're eating like meat and beans and stuff like that. And you're not eating any carbs. You stay away from the carbs because they're high energy. You stay away from the fats because they're high energy. You even stay away from fruit because it's full of sugar, simple sugar, right? Your body can easily convert it. Okay, so a lot of these like fad diets, like the Atkins diet, which has more recently been shown to be quite bad for you. Okay, was it paleo diet or paleo diet, something like that. So you basically only eat meat again. Okay, things like that, and they're just protein is hard to break down. Protein is hard for us to convert into energy. Okay, so if we only eat protein, our body spends a whole bunch of its energy trying to make it into something we can use. Okay, so you lose weight by not consuming high energy foods. Okay, if you eat French fries, which are awesome, okay, why are they so high calorie? Well, actually, it's not the salt. The salt actually has no calories, but it's plant fat, starch, right? Potato is all starch, and it's cooked by deep frying it, which means put it in animal fat to cook it. Okay? So we take plant fat and we cook it in animal fat, which of course it absorbs, and then it makes the yummiest thing ever. Okay? Because our body is conditioned to say, that's got lots of calories, so it tastes good. Okay? We naturally crave things that are high energy because our body has evolved to go, high energy things are good. Okay? We want them, so our body naturally does that. All right? Kind of making sense? Okay? So this carbon cycle, okay, or these two chemical reactions, which are the reverse of each other, are the basis for all organisms to survive. Okay? But how you get your glucose is your mode of nutrition. Okay? So, the first mode of nutrition. Oh, come on. Okay. First mode of nutrition we're going to talk about, chemoheterotroph. Okay, so this big long word here is definitely important. Chemoheterotroph. Okay? If you break that word down, that word means chemical other feeder. Okay? Basically, it needs the chemicals from other organisms to live. Okay, so animals are obviously chemoheterotrophs. We eat other organisms, plants, animals, fungi. Okay, we eat all those other organisms, and our body converts their tissues into glucose. An earthworm, also a chemoheterotroph. They eat dirt. There's lots of, energy-providing molecules in dirt, depending on the kind of dirt. But the kind of dirt we'd see earthworms in would have lots of that. Don't eat dirt. Okay, it's also full of a lot of things that are not good for you, but they can eat it. And fungi. Okay, for a very long time, in fact, even when I was in high school, I know that's a long time ago. Tablets were things you carved commandments in back then, but okay. Fungi were actually in the plant kingdom, which made 0 sense. Fungi don't carry out photosynthesis, which is kind of the defining characteristic of plants. But because they grew out of the ground, that's where they put them. Okay? But they're actually more closely related to us. Okay? They consume the tissue of other organisms for food, live or dead. Okay? So some fungi grows on, your food. Okay? If you've left it for too long, it's been in the pantry and you come and it's furry. Okay, well, that's mold. Mold is a fungus. Okay, and it's just consuming the organic material of that food. Okay, if you see it growing on a tree in the woods, same thing. Okay, it's parasitic. It's using the organic material of that tree for food. If you have athlete's foot, okay, that's fungus. You know why it's itchy? It's eating you.
Gas.
Okay. But it's true. Okay? And a very similar fungus grows on your scalp. Okay? Causes dandruff. How many of you are resisting the urge to scratch your head right now? Okay? But it's true. Okay? These fungi grow on our bodies all the time. Most of the time your immune system keeps them in check and you don't even really notice them. Okay? But if you get a severe case of athlete's foot, your foot will appear like red and it'll be really itchy and the skin will flake off. Okay? Not like exposing the bone, I mean like it'll exfoliate a little bit faster. Okay? And it'll be really itchy because what the fungus is doing is putting its feeding apparatus called hyphae. They look under a microscope like roots. Okay? And it's driving those into your skin. And unlike us, a fungus digests its food outside of its body instead of inside. We have internal digestion. A fungus has external digestion. So it secretes the digestive enzymes and they digest the surrounding material and then they absorb the stuff they need that way. So your foot's itchy because the fungus is doing exactly that. It's digesting you. Okay? And you feel that as uncomfortable. Okay? Itchy. All right, but it's still the same process. They are consuming the organic material from other organisms for their source of energy. Okay. All right, making sense so far? Okay, so a chemoheterotroph needs to consume organic material from another organism for food. That organism can be alive or dead. Okay, so all of our decomposing organisms, bacteria, okay, fungi, all of that kind of stuff, they're consuming still the organic material from another organism. Okay, it doesn't have to be alive to count. Okay, so if you're a chemoheterotroph, generally, okay, your cells are going to have certain structures in them. Now, this is an animal cell. A fungal cell actually has a cell wall. Okay, because fungi don't move, okay? They grow like a plant, okay? They're sessile, they stay in one place. So their cells look a little different, but internally, they are very much like an animal cell, okay? They have the nucleus, and they have the rough ER, and the smooth ER, and the Golgi, and all of that, but so do plants, okay? What's different about an animal cell is that they have lysosomes, okay? Now, this one here should actually also be labeled lysosome. So both of those. Okay? A lysosome comes off the Golgi apparatus, and when it comes off the Golgi apparatus, it has digestive enzymes in it. Okay? The Golgi apparatus actually kind of produces those. Now, at that point, it actually isn't a lysosome. It's actually called the peroxisome. We'll go over that later. Okay? Once it merges with a food vacuole, so something that's got a food particle enclosed in it, the digestion process will begin. That's when it becomes a lysosome. In a lysosome, which is basically just a bubble, okay, inside the cell, okay, there are digestive enzymes, and when it merges with a food vacuole, the digestion process begins. It's like the stomach of the cell. Plant cells don't need that. Okay? They don't eat. Okay? And I know you're probably thinking, well, what about a Venus flytrap or a pitcher plant or a sundew or anything like that? Okay? Carnivorous plants don't actually get energy from the stuff they eat. Okay? They consume it. There's a sort of a digestion process, but it's external. Okay? But it doesn't provide energy. A Venus flytrap is still primarily photosynthetic. Okay? It will get minerals. They typically grow in soils that aren't very high in certain minerals, and the bugs can provide those. But if you've ever had a Venus flytrap, if they relied on the amount of bugs they catch to survive, they wouldn't. Okay, like I had one in the lab one time, and it would, like, you actually had to take tweezers and feed it ants, okay, because it couldn't catch a thing for itself. Right? So they're not relying on that for their food energy, and they don't have lysosomes. Okay, they have specialized cells that can make the digestive enzymes, but that's it. Okay, so an animal cell is going to have lysosomes in it. Same with a fungal cell. They've got to have parts of them that can make these digestive enzymes so that they can digest the food that they absorb. Okay, so that's where that process occurs. Okay, and then of course they have no cell wall, because an animal needs to be able to what? Move. Okay, if you were an animal and your cells had cell walls, you'd look like you were, oh, what's that game? Minecraft. Okay, you'd look like you'd be blocky. Okay, and you'd like walk like this around because you'd be all stiff. Okay, plants don't move because there's no way for them with the cell walls to be flexible enough to do that. Okay? Our tissue is far more flexible than their tissue is. Okay? Plants don't, well, obviously they don't move. It's not the Lord of the Rings. Okay? They're not like Treebeard and running around. Okay? They stay put, and so they need to be able to support themselves. That's what they need the cell walls for. Animal cells need to be mobile. They need to be flexible. They got to be able to stretch. Okay? So they don't have a cell wall. But they do have something we're not going to label, but we'll just talk about here really quickly. Microtubules and microfilaments. They're like little bungee cords that are attached to different parts of the cell membrane. So when the cell stretches or twists, it doesn't tear. Okay? These can help it prevent tearing. Can you still tear cells?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Okay? It's not going to be 100% of the time that it's going to work. In fact, if you're exercising, you're purposefully tearing muscle cells. Okay? You don't tear the whole muscle, but you tear individual fibers, and then when they grow back together, they're stronger. Okay? Those microfilaments and microfibers will grow back together, okay? And that will be stronger afterwards. Sometimes it's bigger afterwards too.
So lysosome kind of breaks apart from the Golgi apparatus to like form stuff to break down your food.
Right, so the Golgi apparatus actually makes some of the digestive enzymes that are in a lysosome. And the Golgi apparatus just makes these vesicles, so they come off the Golgi and they're just a bubble. Inside that bubble are some digestive enzymes, if it's gonna be a lysosome. Sometimes the stuff that comes off of the Golgi can be a hormone, and it's headed for the cell membrane, so it can be secreted. Okay, so the Golgi is just in charge of making vesicles to contain things. Okay, sometimes it makes lysosomes, sometimes it makes hormone vesicles, sometimes it's just waste materials that it wants to get rid of, and they go to the cell membrane. So its job is importing and exporting, basically. Okay. All right, so the lysosome can then digest the food, and then those products would diffuse through the cell and get to wherever they're needed. Okay, usually they go to the mitochondria because the mitochondria is where cell respiration occurs. That's why fungi, plants, and animals all have them. Okay, that's where cellular respiration occurs. Okay, so obviously they look different, but the reason for that difference is how they get their glucose. Okay, that is the primary kind of function of a cell, is to make sure that it can feed itself. Okay, now anything that's photosynthetic is a photoautotroph. Okay, so we talked chemoheterotrophs, okay, chemical other feeder. Okay, these are light self feeders. Photo meaning light, auto meaning self, troph meaning feeder. Okay, so light self. Okay, so this is kind of the carbon cycle here on the right side of the screen. Okay, you can see that there's, oxygen and organic compounds. Those are made by the plants. Okay, they consume the carbon dioxide in order to make that happen. Okay, and then that goes to the animals and the fungi. Those are fungi. Someone said, what is there a nuclear explosion for on there? Because that one kind of looked like it when it was just like this. Okay, that's why we call it a mushroom cloud. Kind of looks like one. Okay, so that's the carbon cycle. Okay, carbon dioxide and water are needed for photosynthesis. Photosynthesis makes the organic compounds that both plants and animals and fungi and insects and all the other stuff need. Okay, they produce water and carbon dioxide as a byproduct, and it just keeps going around and around. Okay, it's those modes of nutrition that produce that cycle. You may. Okay, everybody good with that? You do, like, the first unit of Bio 20 is photosynthesis and cellular respiration. Okay, so you'll talk about those two processes in detail, like as soon as you get to Bio 20. Okay, that's the first thing. So we don't talk about it in detail. We just say, hey, this is what photosynthesis does. And then we walk away. Okay? All right, so photoautotrophs, okay, are going to have different structures within their cells. Okay, the main one are the chloroplasts. Okay, so chloroplasts are often drawn looking something like these. Okay, they're usually fairly ovoid. Okay, and inside of them, if you get a really good look at them, sometimes you'll see in the chloroplast things that look like stacked, like poker chips or coins or something like that, okay? And those are actually where the light reactions, okay, the part of the photosynthesis that captures the light, okay, and breaks apart the carbon dioxide and water, that's where that occurs, okay? And then the stuff from there goes to what we call the dark reactions, or the Calvin cycle, and that's where the glucose is actually produced. That's what you'll learn in Bio 20 in excruciating detail, okay? We just need to know that in the chloroplast, photosynthesis happens, okay? We get to simplify it a little bit in Science 10, okay? So in the chloroplast, that's the photosynthetic organ. It actually has two membranes. It's got a double membrane, okay? Most things do not, but they have a double membrane because those reactions can they kind of need to be insulated from the rest of the cell a little bit, so it has a double membrane. Okay, so you got a plant cell is going to have chloroplasts in it. All plant cells are going to have chloroplasts in them, even root cells. Okay, why would that be strange?
Because roots don't see the sun.
Right, roots don't see the sun. Roots don't carry out any photosynthesis. They got chloroplasts in them, not very many, and they're basically inactive because there's no light that's going to reach them. Okay, unless, I don't know if any of you have ever grown like a vegetable garden, but sometimes when you take a carrot, the top of it is green, okay, or a potato, if it's really near the surface, it might have a little bit of green in its skin. If it gets any kind of light, those chloroplasts will activate and it'll start making more chlorophyll and it'll start carrying out photosynthesis. Okay, it's usually the part we cut off. Okay. All right, so all the plant cells are going to have those. Some plant cells are loaded full of them. Okay, what part, if I'm looking at a leaf, okay, so one of the leaves off of these plants here, if I'm looking at a leaf, where's the most logical place for the cells with the most chloroplasts to be? On the top, yeah. Okay, because the top is the part that gets the most sun. Okay, now I'm going to show you over here that I torment my plants a little bit for the purpose of learning. Okay, you can see that this plant is not well. Okay, and that's because I haven't watered it for quite a while on purpose for like this lesson and a few lessons about plants later. Okay, when they start to get like this, right, which way do their leaves face?
No.
Downwards. Okay, they certainly don't face upwards. When a plant is well watered, like this one, okay, and these are basically the same kind of plant, okay, the leaves are quite upright, okay, and their blade is facing the sun. Well, the sun, that's the sun that plant gets, okay, but they're up like that. When they wilt and they're short on water, they do this, okay, then they're not going to carry out as much photosynthesis, which requires water. Okay, it's kind of a natural adaptation that they have. Now, if I water that plant, will it perk back up? It has every other time I've done that to it. There was one time where it was pretty close to crunchy, and I lost quite a bit of it, but it still came back. Okay? Once the whole plant is crunchy, you're not going to save it. I've learned that over time. Okay? All right, so now the water vacuoles, okay, are another thing. So this big water vacuole here, that's the part of the plant the part of the plant cell that enables that plant to look the way it does, okay, upright, firm, healthy looking, okay, versus these ones, which look limp, okay. That's because I haven't watered this plant and it's very thirsty, and it's drawn water out of the vacuoles. Plants don't like to do that, okay. They don't like. Okay, so. Plants don't like to do this, but they will in an emergency. They'll pull water out of these water vacuoles. They're not meant to be a water reservoir. They don't put water there to store it. They put water there so that their plants will be firm, or their leaves will be firm and upright, facing the sun and doing what they're supposed to do, make sugar. Okay? But if a plant starts to get dehydrated, it'll pull water out of the vacuole to save itself at the cost of now the leaf will go limp or wilt. Okay? So the vacuoles in that plant are pretty much empty. The vacuoles in that plant are very full. Okay, that sort of makes sense? So the purpose of the vacuole is actually to hold the plant up. It's a supportive function, same as the cell wall. Okay, in fact, they work together. Okay, the cell walls of that plant are perfectly intact, but they're not strong enough by themselves to support the plant. Okay, it needs both the water vacuoles and the cell walls to keep it upright where it can carry out photosynthesis. Okay? If plants were mobile, they'd just go, it's shady over here, and then just walk back out into the sun again. But they can't do that, right? So what they have to do is be able to hold themselves upright when the sun is available in order to catch it. Okay? Making some sense? So the plant's cell wall and water vacuole, the two things the animal cell does not have, are necessary to help it effectively carry out photosynthesis. Okay, so chloroplasts, water vacuoles, cell walls, those are the three structures, that are really unique to plants that help it with its mode of nutrition. Okay, why plants and animals look different. Okay, So plants and animal cells also have lots of similarities, more than they have differences, okay? And we know that that's in the areas of intracellular transport, okay, so how things move within the cell, in and out of the cell, okay? Waste excretions done the same, okay? All of that stuff is the same, right? And then we've already talked about the reason for that is that they had a common ancestor in the distant past, some single-celled organism that they descended from. Okay, everybody good with that? All right. Okay, I would like you guys to please answer those 5 questions. That is the extent of the material from today that will be on tomorrow's quiz. Okay, so the stuff about modes of nutrition, that is on tomorrow's quiz. So no chemoheterotroph, photoautotroph, okay, and why the cells are different. That's what's going to be on there. Okay. After we go through these, I'll give you a little break, and then we're going to label our cells. Okay? All right, so what's the main reason for the differences between plant and animal cells? 3 words. Modes of nutrition, right. Okay. What organelle supplies plants with energy? What process does it use? Chloroplast? Photosynthesis. Okay, what organelle supplies animal cells with energy? Lysosome. And it does? Digestion, yeah. Okay.
Please excuse the interruption. If there are any grade 10s going for picture retakes with the last name starting with M to S, please go down to the cafeteria now. Thank you.
Okay, transport within animal and plant cells is done in the same fashion. We're actually going to learn about that next week. Okay, why would this have been kept the same from an evolutionary perspective when so many other things have been altered?
Would it just be because that structure or that transportation system, both animals and plants can use it effectively?
Right. If it ain't broke, don't fix it. Okay, that's how evolution and natural selection works. Okay, if it works, it will be selected for. If it doesn't work, it'll be selected against. Okay, it's pretty simple. These processes have been around for literally billions of years. Okay, and they work, and nothing better has come along to supplant them. Okay, so they're still there. All right, and number 5, the nutritional needs of plants and animals are very different. Okay, which would have survived best in a primordial Earth? So we're talking, 3.5 billion years ago or so. Okay, that had very little oxygen or organic material available. Plants, yeah. The first organisms to evolve, were photosynthetic algae or blue-green algae, cyanobacteria. Okay, because they could make their own food using what was available, light and carbon dioxide. There was lots of that. Okay? In fact, there was a period of time where photosynthetic organisms just got out of control, and they produced so much oxygen, and there were no organisms to consume it other than themselves. Okay? That they caused a massive climate shift on Earth. Okay? Something called snowball Earth. Okay? All the greenhouse gases, carbon dioxide and everything, were literally consumed by these organisms, and the levels of oxygen became toxic, okay, in the atmosphere and in the water, okay, to the point where lots of organisms died off. It was one of the mass extinctions that Earth experienced. Okay? It was basically like they were living in their own waste to the point where it became so toxic they died. Okay? That's a pretty horrible way to go when you say it like that. But it's true. Okay? And because all the greenhouse gases were taken out of the atmosphere, the Earth cooled a lot. Okay? And caused a massive ice age that lasted for millions of years. Okay? So the first things to evolve would have had to have been photosynthetic, because that's what could have survived. If there's no oxygen or organic material available in early Earth, then how are animals going to live? There's nothing for them to eat, and not enough oxygen for them to digest it, even if they had it. Okay? Everyone all right with that? Okay. I'm going to give you about a 5-minute break here, and then we're going to do our cell diagrams. I apologize that they are not in color, but the color copier was on the fritz again yesterday, so we'll have to survive with that. I will put a color copy on Google Classroom today, and if you have a color printer at home, you can feel free to print it for yourself, but our color copier has not been very cooperative lately. Okay. So I'll give you a 5-minute break here, and then we will start labeling. All right, so we will look at the plant cell first here, guys. Okay, what's the big purple thing? Nucleus. Okay. What does the nucleus do? Yeah, it stores the DNA. Okay, that is its job. Okay, I know that somewhere along the way you were probably taught that the nucleus is the brain of the cell. It's not a brain. Okay, it's not a brain. The nucleus doesn't control anything. It doesn't make decisions or affect things that go on in the rest of the cell. The nucleus is a library. Okay, if you need an analogy for it, it's a library. It's where all the information required to make whatever the cell needs and run the cell are stored. Okay, so the nucleus is not a brain. Okay, I know a lot of people like to say that, but it's not. And I'm sorry for sounding so sarcastic, not really sorry. Okay, all right, what's the purple dot inside the nucleus? The nucleolus, yeah. Okay, I'm not real sticky on spelling, except for those two structures, okay? Because I find what happens is sometimes people can't remember which one's which, and they're like, oh, Cutter's a nice guy. I'll write nucleolus, and he'll be forgiving. No, he won't on that one, okay? Nucleolus, it's gonna need 2 L's for that one and only 1 L, and there's of course that extra O in there, okay, for that. Okay, we just gotta make sure we tell them apart. Now, the nucleolus actually does control some things within the cell, okay? And the main thing that it controls is the synthesis of proteins. Okay, remember, this is not about what they do. You've got notes in lesson 5 on what everything does. I'm just kind of talking about it right now. Okay, so in the nucleolus, a couple of things happen. Ribosomes can get built, okay? And ribosomes are the things that make protein outside of the nucleus, so they actually get exported from there. Okay, the other thing the nucleolus does is it copies your DNA. So while the DNA is a library, it doesn't lend out its books, okay? Because your DNA is important and fragile to an extent. So when a part of your cell says, I need to make this material, the nucleus doesn't go, oh, here's the section of the DNA that tells you how to do it. Just bring it back when you're done, okay? It would never do that. That part of the DNA stays in the nucleus. So what the nucleolus does is it uses an enzyme called RNA transcriptase. You'll never need to know that, okay, but that's what it's called. Okay? And it copies, so it pulls the double strands of the DNA helix, pulls them apart, and it copies one side. Okay? Then it sends that copy, which is just RNA, because it's a single strand instead of 2. Okay? So it sends that RNA, the ribonucleic acid, out. That's the copy of the book that tells the cell how to make that stuff. Okay? So the nucleus is a library, the nucleolus is the librarian who copies the books and sends the copies of the books out for the cell to use. Okay? That copy never comes back. It's okay, it's just a copy. Right? It gets used for what it needs to get used for and then it just gets recycled. Okay, everyone all right with that idea? So the nucleus actually does control some things. It controls protein synthesis, which is pretty important. Okay. All right, what would we call the outside of the nucleus? What do we call the outside of the cell?
Cell wall.
Cell membrane. Yeah, there's a cell wall in a plant cell as well. Okay, so the outside of the nucleus would be the nuclear membrane. Yeah. Okay, so it's the nuclear membrane. Now, most membranes are what we would call semi-permeable or selectively permeable. That means some things can get through them and some things can't. Okay, it's how your cell kind of, makes sure that only the stuff it wants gets in most of the time. okay? It kind of works like a border, okay? You know, it does its best to, you know, keep trouble out and stuff like that. So that's what the membranes do, except for the nuclear membrane. The nuclear membrane is basically impermeable. Nothing goes in or out of the nucleus except genetic material. That's how a virus can hijack your cell, right? It sends in that genetic material, and the nucleus goes, oh, what are you doing out there? You gotta get in here, and then you're in trouble, okay? But that's really the only thing that gets in or out, because what's inside the nucleus is so delicate and so important. So the nuclear membrane is basically impermeable. It just has these holes called nuclear pores, which are not labeled, and you will not be required to label, okay? They open and close to allow the RNA in and out. That's all that goes in and out, is just the RNA, okay? So it's very, very protective. All right. What's the inside of the cell called? Cytoplasm. Okay? So cytoplasm is basically water. Okay? It's the fluid that fills up the cell. It's important that a cell is filled with fluid because that allows diffusion, which is how stuff moves throughout the cell, to occur. Right? Diffusion occurs better in fluids, okay, like water, liquids, than it does through air. Diffusion can still happen through air, okay? If somebody were to fart in here, everyone would experience it because it would diffuse through the air and get to everyone, okay? But in this case, fluid is better because fluid will kind of hold up the organelles. And I mean, if the cell was just filled with air, what would all the organelles do? They'd just fall, right? That wouldn't be very good. Right, and the rest of the organism is mostly fluid, so it just kind of keeps the consistency there. Fluids are what works better. Okay, so it's basically about the same consistency and density as water. Okay, it is mostly water after all, with some things dissolved in it. Okay, but it's not like a jelly. Okay, sometimes people are like, oh, the cytoplasm is like this gel-like fluid. It's not at all gel-like. Okay, it's basically just water. Okay, so the cytoplasm just facilitates diffusion and intracellular transport. It allows things to move around inside the cell. That's its main job. Okay, what is this? Well, on yours it's not brown, but on mine it's brown, and it's got these little turquoise dots on it. What is that stuff?
Rough ER.
Right, rough endoplasmic reticulum. I will be satisfied with ER. Okay, but know that that means endoplasmic reticulum. The rough endoplasmic reticulum mostly transports proteins. Okay, what are the little turquoise dots that it's covered in?
Ribosomes.
Those are ribosomes. That's what makes it look rough. Okay? You can't see ribosomes with a light microscope. Okay? You can only see them with an electron microscope. They're exceptionally tiny. But there's so many of them on the rough ER that they make the rough ER look significantly different than smooth ER.
Please excuse the interruption. We are looking for grade 10s that are wanting their pictures retaken with the last names P to Z. Please come down to the cafeteria. Thank you.
Okay, anybody else need to go? So the ribosomes make protein. They're produced by the nucleolus, and then they go out, and most of them just attach to the rough ER. Okay? It makes sense for them to be that close to the nucleus. That's where the commands are coming from, right? The RNA that gets sent out from the nucleolus, those copies, okay? They come out and they go, and the ribosomes are right there. Okay, so those pieces of RNA don't have to travel far. There's lots of ribosomes right there. They make the protein. The rough ER can quickly transport it away. So it's why you see it usually around the nucleus. Okay, and it's usually arranged in the way that this diagram shows. Okay, what we can see through a light microscope, and what we'll look at next week, okay, is that if you can imagine the nucleus as a face, the rough ER looks like a beard. Okay, and like a long Santa Claus beard. Okay, it basically looks like the nucleus has a beard. That's the rough ER that's surrounding it. Okay. The ribosomes make protein. So they receive those pieces of RNA that are the code for making whatever the cell needs, and then they produce the protein. All right, and then the next thing, and this is something that no cell diagram I have ever seen represents well, and there's good reason for that. Okay, the next thing is the smooth ER. So that's this stuff here. Okay, the main difference, it's not nearly as organized. The rough ER is right around the nucleus, and it's generally pretty folded, pretty organized looking compared to this. Okay, the smooth ER, and the reason most cells don't represent it well is because it's everywhere. Most cells only show it as a small amount right next to the rough ER, but it's actually everywhere. But we can't see it. Okay? Unless you really know what you're looking for, you don't see the smooth ER, but it's everywhere. Okay? Without the ribosomes, it's hard to see, and it doesn't generally pick up any stains that we might add, okay, to make other things stand out. Okay? So it's there, and there's a lot of it, and the reason for that is it does a lot of things. Okay? It probably does more than any other organelle in the cell. Okay? It can make fat-soluble hormones. It can produce fats. Okay? It can break down complex carbohydrates. Okay, so starches, they can be broken down into simpler things for the lysosome to handle more easily. Okay? And probably its most important job is to detoxify poisons. Okay? We consume things that are, chemically harmful to us all the time. Right? We don't, it's not like we're taking things intentionally, but there's always stuff, even additives in your food that aren't good for you, caffeine, alcohol, not that you guys consume that, okay? But things like that we consume, and they're toxic. The smooth ER's job is to break those things down into things that are less harmful, okay? And that's why your liver cells have more smooth ER than any other cell in your body. Okay? Because your liver's job is to clean toxins out of your blood. Okay? So those liver cells would have more smooth ER than anything else. Okay, what's this yellow thing? It's the Golgi apparatus. Golgi apparatus. Okay? So the Golgi apparatus is in shipping and receiving. Okay, so it receives things from the rest of the cell, processes and packages them for export. Right? We already talked about how the lysosomes come off of there. Now the lysosomes aren't going to leave the cell, but the stuff that's inside of them, you don't want that just swimming around inside the cell. It's digestive enzymes. They're designed to digest cellular material. Okay? You don't want that just hanging around inside the cell.
We are now looking for grade 11's last name starting with A to F to come down for picture retakes in the cafeteria. Thank you.
Okay? It would be the equivalent of if suddenly you had a hole in your stomach and the stomach acid came out. Okay? Would that be good for the rest of your insides? No, absolutely not. Well, the same is true for the lysosome. The whole reason the digestive enzymes are encased in that piece of membrane is that they would be bad for the rest of the cell. Okay, so the Golgi apparatus processes that stuff and puts it in a bubble, okay, that it sends out. It also puts in a bubble waste products, and they go towards the cell membrane. And once they hit the cell membrane, because they're made of the same material as the cell membrane, it just merges with the membrane, and whatever was inside just pops out, okay, and then it's out into somebody else's problem. Okay? In an animal, it's into the bloodstream and it's taken away and filtered out or whatever. Okay? In a plant, they get rid of their toxic products similarly. Okay? All right, so the Golgi apparatus basically processes materials for transport or export from the cell. Okay? It actually has a receiving side. All the stuff comes in on one side and leaves from the other. Okay? It's called the cis face and the trans face. You'll never need to know that for Science 10, but that's what they're called. Okay? All right, what are those blue sausage-like things there at the bottom? Those are the mitochondria. Okay, Now, you've probably been taught somewhere along the way that the mitochondria are the powerhouse of the cell. Okay? Which is, I mean, it's a junior high explanation of what they do, and it's not inaccurate, it's fine. Okay? But at a high school level, how do they power the cell? Okay? Well, they power the cell by carrying out cellular respiration. Yeah, this is the organelle that takes sugar, glucose, and reacts it with oxygen and produces energy, carbon dioxide, and water. Okay, so the mitochondria, okay, their job is to make the energy that powers the cell, okay, through cellular respiration. So if I was putting that on a test and I wanted you to give me a function of the mitochondria, I would want to see cellular respiration, not powerhouse of the cell. Okay, I want a grade 10 level answer. Okay, it's not that powerhouse of the cell is wrong. Okay, like brain of the cell was wrong. Okay, but it's also, we want the grade 10 level answer, which is it uses cellular respiration to make energy for the cell. Okay, what is this one pointing to?
Cell membrane.
That is the cell membrane. Okay, it's inside. This one here is pointing at the cell wall. So this one is the cell membrane. Sometimes people call it the plasma membrane. Okay, I like the cell membrane better. Okay. So cell membranes are that protective, semi-permeable or selectively permeable barrier between the inside of the cell and the outside of the cell. It's made of fats, almost exclusively out of fats. Okay. Now, when we take the lesson about what all the parts of the cell do, I'll show you a more accurate diagram of what a cell membrane looks like. We get this idea that it's like cellophane, okay? It's like transparent layer and it's all one thing. You know, it looks like if you took, saran wrap and wrap something up, that's what it would look like. It's actually more like Jell-O salad. Okay, if you've ever seen what, like when they put the fruit and stuff in the Jell-O, okay? The cell membrane is more like that. Okay, it's flexible and jiggly, and there's all kinds of things embedded in it. Okay, so it's far more complex than just a wall or a barrier. Okay, and it basically can select what things get in, what things get out, and a lot of that is just how big is the thing trying to get in or out. Okay, if the thing that's trying to get in is really big, it's not going to get through the membrane. Sometimes the membrane will have to engulf it. Okay, but it can do that in an animal, not in a plant. Okay. For this one here, this is the cell wall. Okay, now this is another one where people's kind of visual representation of it is actually very different than what it really looks like. Flip it over.
That's the cell wall, not the cell membrane.
Oh, I wrote membrane again. Thank you. Okay, so cell wall. Yeah, good catch. Okay, so the cell wall is not a wall like these walls. Okay, it's not like, I can't walk through these walls, nor am I going to try. Okay, so that's a silly demonstration. The cell wall is more like when a house is being built and it's just framed. Okay, when it's just framed, they haven't put the sheeting on the outside or the drywall on the inside. Can you walk through the walls? Yeah, you just walk between the studs. That's what the cell wall is like. It's more of a frame than it is a wall. Okay? Under a light microscope, it might appear like a wall, but it's actually just a frame. And it's only there to support the shape of the cell in concert with the water vacuoles, as we talked about earlier. Okay? So it's a supportive thing. It's not protective. Okay? The cell, people get this idea that the wall protects you. Okay? The wall doesn't protect the cell. It holds the cell's shape. Okay? That's all it's for. So really a better way to say it would be cell frame. Okay? But we don't say it that way. Okay? But the cell wall is really like the walls of a house that have just been framed. It's just holding the shape. Okay? That sort of makes sense? All right, and then we've got, for this one here, this is the chloroplast. What does it do?
Makes photosynthesis.
Carries out photosynthesis. If you wrote on the test, if I gave you label this and give me the function, chloroplast, photosynthesis, check, we're good. Okay, that's what it does. All right, what's the big blue thing?
Water vacuum.
That's the water vacuole. Now I know I'm skipping one, I'll come back to it. Okay, so this is the water vacuole. Okay, and we already talked about what that does. It also helps to hold the shape of the cell it basically holds from inside where the wall holds from the outside. So it pushes everything against the wall, keeping the shape. It's kind of like if you have like a water balloon and you've only filled it a little bit, it's quite flimsy. Okay, but if you fill it a lot, it's quite a bit more firm to push on. Okay, that's what the water vacuole is like. When it's really full and it's got a lot of pressure, it pushes hard against the wall and it can hold the shape of the cell easily. Okay, now it has to be surrounded by a special membrane because there's a lot of pressure, and that membrane is called a tonoplast.
On the test, would we have to put a water vacuole or could we just put vacuole?
Note, you would have to specify water vacuole.
Okay.
Oh, good, Chad. Sorry, you got interrupted there. I didn't know what the last one. Okay, so that's the plant cell. Now, here's the good news. We've only got a few minutes, 2 minutes or so, so we're not going to get to the animal cell, okay? Or we're not going to get through it for sure. But we'll get through it easily after the quiz tomorrow because I don't think the quiz is going to take the whole class. But here's the good news. Are most of the parts the same?
Yes.
Yes. Okay, so it's going to take us no time at all to burn through the animal cell, okay, because pretty much everything's the same. Question? Did we miss one? Did I miss one? Oh, this little line here? I missed brushing that out. I airbrushed it out of everywhere else. If you look really close, you can see some of its remnants here as well. I just missed that part. So no, we didn't miss anything. I don't know. It shouldn't have been labeled in my, what the heck? That looks like a food vacuole or a lysosome that plants don't have. So. Okay, yeah, we'll leave it there for today, guys. Okay, good job today. I know it was a lot of me talking and you listening, but bio is a lot of empty vessel teaching. Yo!